It didn't start with me being asleep. It started with me being awake. And that's the only reason I know with absolute, terrifying certainty that what I saw was real. My name is Daniel Marsh, and for the past 6 months I've been working the graveyard shift at Premier Skilled Nursing Facility, a sprawling, beige brick complex that sits on the edge of Ridgefield, Ohio. It's the kind of town where everyone knows everyone, and the big news is when the high school football team wins a game. It's a quiet, normal place, nestled in the rolling farmlands about an hour outside of Columbus. Premier is just as unremarkable from the outside, a place where the elderly go to wait out their final years, surrounded by laminated pictures of grandchildren and the faint, perpetual smell of boiled vegetables and antiseptic. But when you work nights at a place like that, you start to notice things the day shift doesn't. The way the building settles with deep, groaning sighs after midnight. The way the fluorescent lights in the east hallway flicker in a pattern that almost seems like a code. The way the air gets heavy, thick with something other than dust, right around 3:00 a.m. The nurses call it the witching hour. Old man Kowalski, a retired engineer on the 3rd floor, calls it something else. He calls it the shift change. I thought he was just a lonely old man with a head full of ghosts. I was wrong. My job is unglamorous. I'm a night auditor, which means I'm the guy in the front office making sure the overnight staff have what they need, that the security cameras are rolling, and that the front desk is always manned in case of an emergency. It's a lonely, monotonous job, but it pays the bills, and for a guy like me who doesn't sleep well anyway, it's a perfect fit. I spend my hours with a laptop and a thermos of black coffee, listening to podcasts about unsolved mysteries. True crime is my escape, my thrill, a way to feel a spark of excitement in the endless quiet of the night. On the night of October 17th, the quiet was suffocating. A storm had rolled in from the west, and heavy rain lashed against the facility's large, plate-glass windows in rhythmic, hypnotic waves. The wind howled around the corners of the building, a low, mournful sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I was about 100 pages into a book about a series of disappearances in the Midwest when the phone on the desk let out a shrill, piercing ring. It was a direct line, one I rarely saw used. The caller ID displayed a single word, East Cam. My blood ran cold. East Cam was the security camera feed for the old, decommissioned physiotherapy wing on the eastern edge of the building. The wing had been closed for years, ever since the state cut funding. The lights were off, the rooms empty. The only reason the camera was still active was that it was wired to the same system as the rest of the building, and it was cheaper to leave it than to have someone come out and disconnect it. I reached for the receiver with a pounding heart. "Hello? Front desk, this is Daniel." There was silence on the other end, just the faint hiss of static, and beneath it a sound I couldn't quite place, a rhythmic, muffled thumping. "Hello?" I repeated, my voice tighter this time. "Is someone there?" Then a voice. It was low and raspy, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It didn't sound like it was coming through the phone. It sounded like it was coming from just behind the front desk, right over my shoulder. "Is the new man watching?" The line went dead. I spun in my chair, but the lobby was empty. The only light was the pale green glow of the monitors in front of me. My skin was crawling. I had to check. I clicked the icon for the East Cam feed and the screen flickered to life. It was pitch black, as I expected. The windowless hallway of the old PT wing was a void of darkness, so complete it seemed to swallow even the faint static of the camera. But I saw something. A shape. It was barely discernible, a slightly darker patch against the darkness, moving slowly, not walking. It wasn't walking. It was slithering, a slow, undulating motion along the floor like a great serpentine shadow. My finger hovered over the button to call the night nurse when the camera feed cut out completely, fizzing into a black void that was too dark, too empty. Then a new image appeared. It wasn't the hallway. It was my office. The camera feed showed me the front office from a high corner angle, like the one in the main lobby. I saw my own figure hunched over the desk, my reflection ghostly in the dark window behind me. I was looking at myself, and I was alone. But on the screen, a thin, pale hand, impossibly long and with fingers like desiccated twigs, was creeping over my shoulder, reaching for the keyboard where my own hand was resting. I yanked my hand away from the keyboard as if it were on fire. I scrambled out of my chair, knocking it over in the process, the clatter echoing in the empty lobby. The screen was still showing the feed of my office, but now it was empty. The chair was on the floor, my coffee cup was rolling under the desk, but there was no me. And no hand, just an empty room. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I stood there for a long time, panting, staring at the silent screen. It was just a glitch, a feedback loop from the storm, a bad signal, old wiring. I told myself all the rational explanations, and I made myself walk back to my desk. I sat down, retrieved my coffee, and picked up my book. But I couldn't read. I just sat there, staring at the black screen, listening to the rain. At 3:00 a.m. exactly, the main lights in the lobby flickered once, then died. I was plunged into darkness with only the faint glow of the emergency exit signs for company. The blackness was heavy, pressing in on me from all sides. I fumbled for my desk lamp, but it wouldn't come on. The power was out. This was a skilled nursing facility. It had a backup generator, but it took a minute or two to kick in. I sat in the darkness, frozen. The silence was absolute for a moment, and then I heard it. A soft, dragging sound. It was coming from the east hallway, the one that connected to the old PT wing. It was a slow, labored scraping against the linoleum floor, punctuated by a wet sucking sound. Something was being dragged down that hallway, something heavy. The generator roared to life, and the lights flickered back on. The east hallway stretched out before me, empty and silent. I forced myself out of the chair and walked to the end of the hall where it came to a T-intersection. To the left was the hospital wing. To the right was a thick industrial metal door, the door to the old wing. It was always locked. It wasn't locked now. The door was ajar, a sliver of darkness visible through the gap. My own reflection in the glass panel of the door was pale and terrified. I felt a pull, a dreadful curiosity that overrode my common sense. I gently pushed the door open, and the smell hit me. It wasn't the stale smell of disuse. It was the smell of wet earth and cold, ancient stone. The hallway inside was dark, but I could see a faint outline on the floor. It was a path, a swath of dust that had been cleared as if something had been dragged along the floor recently. The drag marks went to the door of what was once the hot tub room. The door was shut, but I saw faint light coming from the gap beneath it. A flickering yellow light. I was scared, more scared than I had ever been in my life, but I had to look. I had to know. I pushed the door open. The room was not empty. It was filled with old, rusted medical equipment, but there in the center was a heavy hospital bed. And on that bed lay a figure. It was old, impossibly old, with pale, parchment-like skin stretched taut over sharp bones. Its face was a hollow mask with sunken cheeks and closed eyes. It was wearing a stained, gray hospital gown. I didn't recognize them as any of the residents. This was something that belonged in a forgotten tomb, not a physiotherapy wing. It was probably a prank. One of the staff, maybe, dressed up for Halloween, but the thing's chest was not moving. It wasn't breathing. The flickering light source was a small, battery-powered lamp on a bedside table, and next to it was a photograph in a tarnished silver frame. I took a step closer, my eyes unable to look away from that sleeping, skeletal face. I reached out for the photograph. It was a picture of the facility's groundbreaking ceremony, taken over 40 years ago. The faces of the doctors and trustees were young and smiling. I recognized one of them. Old man Kowalski standing in the back, looking proud. And there in the foreground, shaking the hand of the mayor, was a handsome, distinguished-looking man in a dark suit. I knew that face. I had seen it in my high school history book. It was Dr. Edmund Hale. He had founded this facility, or rather it was his family's estate, and he had built the facility to house research he was conducting. He had died in 1987. A sound came from the bed, a wet, rattling breath. My head snapped up. The thing on the bed was looking at me. Its eyes were open. They were not old and milky. They were the cool, calculating blue of a predator, and its gaunt, skeletal face was twisted into a slow, dreadful smile. I couldn't move. I was frozen, my feet rooted to the spot. It wasn't the paralysis of sleep. It was the paralysis of pure, unadulterated terror. The thing began to sit up, its joints cracking like breaking twigs, its thin lips parted. "The new man is watching," it rasped, the voice a perfect, horrifying echo of the one I'd heard on the phone. "But the new man is also being watched." I stumbled backward out the door and slammed it shut. I ran. I didn't stop running until I was back at the front desk, my hands shaking as I grabbed the phone to call security. But I never made the call, because the security monitors at the desk were all showing the same image now. A high-angle shot of a dark room, the hot tub room. And in the center of the frame, the thing that called itself Dr. Hale was now standing beside the bed, facing the camera. It reached out a long, skeletal arm, and its fingers, like those from my nightmare on the monitor earlier, pressed against the glass of the lens as if trying to reach through. Then the image shifted. The camera feed flickered and the image changed to show the front desk. It showed me standing there, phone in hand, frozen, staring at the monitor. My own face was a mask of horror, and behind me, reflected in the window overlooking the lobby, was the tall, hunched silhouette of the thing from the hot tub room. It was standing right behind me. I didn't need to turn around. I saw it in the reflection, and I saw it smile. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember dropping the phone. All I remember is the profound, crushing silence that followed and the feeling of a cold, papery hand resting on my shoulder, a hand that was nowhere near as cold as the paralysis that seized my entire body, rooting me to the floor as the lights in the building went out again, one by one from the top floor down. The last thing I saw before the entire building was plunged into total, absolute darkness was the flickering screen of the security monitor. The image had changed again. It wasn't a live feed from the building anymore. It was a photograph. A black and white photograph of a single person in a prison-like smock, standing in a bare room. The face was a hollow mask of skin and bone, with sunken cheeks and staring, terrified eyes. It was my face. The power didn't come back on that night, or the next. They found me the following day, sitting in the unlocked, empty hot tub room of the closed east wing, staring at a bare, rusted bed frame. I was perfectly fine, they said. A little confused, a little scared, but physically unharmed. There was no one else in the room. There was no Dr. Hale. There was no photograph of me, but I know what I saw. I'm writing this from a private room at St. Vincent's, where they're monitoring me for exhaustion. The nurses are gentle and professional. They leave the door open for me to help with the anxiety. But they don't know that I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see it. The dark room, the bed, and the camera feed switching to show me the back of my own head. The worst part isn't what happened. The worst part is what's happening now. Because during the day, when the hallway outside my room is bright and full of the sounds of the shift change, I catch my reflection in the darkened glass of the window. And for a split second before I turn away, I see a tall, hunched silhouette standing behind me, a thin, pale hand resting on my shoulder. Waiting. And at night, when I finally succumb to exhaustion and my eyes flutter closed, I don't dream. Instead, I see a flickering, monochrome image. It's a security camera feed showing a small, private room in a psychiatric ward. In the center of the room, a man in a gray smock is sitting on a bed, staring at a wall. He's rocking back and forth, his lips moving, whispering the same two words over and over again. The new man, the new man, the new man. I am the new man, and the camera is always watching,